Bam! The front door of the Ironwood Ranch slammed open so hard. The sound ripped across the valley like a rifle shot, waking up every creature for miles. And waking up someone else, too. Someone the people who broke in definitely hadn't accounted for. They didn't knock, they didn't call, they didn't even think. They just came storming in like they owned the damn place. Two of them, wearing stiff, ill-fitting Navy uniforms with those silly Canyon Ridge Community Patrol patches sewn crookedly onto their arms, strutting around like they were the FBI. They were shouting about code violations and unauthorized fencing, clipboards in hand, radios squawking nonsense, completely oblivious to the fact that this ranch, my home, was and always has been outside their jurisdiction. And they were utterly unaware that the guest just 30 feet from that door was sleeping in his boots, with a badge pinned to his chest and a fully loaded .38 within arm's reach. I stood frozen at the barn gate, pitchfork still dusty from the morning feed, watching the whole thing unfold in slow motion. I tried to yell, but the wind snatched my voice away, and they were already inside, spreading out like they were searching for buried treasure. And then it happened. A deep, booming voice, cold, calm, and dangerous, echoed out from the dark hallway, cutting through the silence of the high desert morning. You just made the worst mistake of your miserable lives. I dropped the pitchfork and sprinted, my boots thudding against the dry earth, yelling, "Sheriff, don't shoot." But I was too late. Sheriff Dwayne Duke Walker was already on his feet. Now, let me tell you how we got to that point. My name is Clay Jensen. I'm a third-generation rancher here in Maverick County, Arizona. My land, the Ironwood Ranch. It's honest, dusty, rolling country, running along the old Salt River where the coyotes howl at night and the sun bleeds gold over the peaks every morning. This land has been in my family for 85 years, passed from my grandfather who carved it out of rock, to my father, and now to me. I live a quiet life, sunup to sundown, the smell of horses and honest work. And I never, ever joined that HOA. The Homeowners Association of Canyon Ridge Estates. Sounds exclusive, right? Like wine and golf carts. Their president, a pompous, tight-fisted little man named Lionel Tate, started sending me letters last year. He claimed my age would fencing violated their desert modern aesthetic guidelines. I laughed, crumpled them up, and used them to start the morning fire. Then came the fines. I ignored them. Next came the threats of legal action. I reported those. My property sits legally, historically, and financially outside their borders, but that didn't stop Tate's little kingdom from trying to expand its empire. Their community patrol started treating my ranch boundaries like they were invisible. That's when I called Duke. Sheriff Dwayne Walker is a friend, a man who knows the difference between a real crime and a misplaced mailbox. He heard about Tate's escalating nonsense, the harassment, the constant boundary pushing, and told me, "Don't you worry, Clay. They step one boot on your land acting like law. I'll handle it personally." Duke had just finished a brutal triple shift. He stopped by for coffee, and I convinced him he was too tired to drive back into town. I told him to crash in the guest room by the front door. He just kicked off his boots, leaned his shotgun against the wall, and passed out. He still had his gun belt on, though. Just a habit. I was out feeding the horses when they hit. They didn't even pause. They used a crowbar, snapped the old brass lock clean off the screen door, and stomped into my house, shouting about non-compliance and immediate property assessment. It was all noise until it wasn't. I lunged onto the porch, my heart hammering against my ribs, just as the sound of a hammer being cocked split the air. Sheriff Walker, a giant of a man, stood framed in the hallway, barefoot, wearing only his undershirt, his badge catching the early light, and that revolver, steady as a rock in his hand. Hands where I can see them. Now, he bellowed. One of the patrol guys instantly dropped his clipboard, papers scattered like confetti. The other, younger one, started reaching for a canister on his belt, but Duke didn't flinch. I said now. Just as I opened my mouth to de-escalate, a third figure stepped through the shattered doorway. No uniform, just a slick, beige suit and expensive loafers. It was Lionel Tate himself, sweating slightly, trying to look imposing. He froze when he saw the gun. "Sheriff, what is the meaning of this armed intrusion?" Tate sputtered. Duke didn't even blink. "Tate, you just sent your little cosplay squad into the wrong house." Tate puffed out his chest, trying to regain his authority. "This man is in violation of HOA codes. We were performing a mandated property standards inspection. Duke growled, lowering the gun ever so slightly, but not putting it away. On private property? Without a warrant? On land that is not even part of your HOA. Tate opened his mouth to lie, but the sound of distant sirens began to growl. Duke had hit his silent emergency signal. The moment the sirens peaked, the younger patrolman panicked and bolted straight out the back door and crashed headfirst right into the newly fixed wire fence, flipping over it like a rag doll before landing face first in a pile of fresh, steaming horse manure. But that wasn't the shocking part. Standing just steps away, calmly sipping coffee from a silver thermos, was Deputy Elena Rodriguez. She'd been signaled by Duke's alert and pulled up silently moments earlier. She didn't shout. She just strolled over, one hand resting on her holster, and said coolly, "That's trespassing, criminal mischief, and attempted flight from a lawful scene, friend. You want to add obstruction to that list, too?" She planted a boot lightly on his back for emphasis. Inside, Tate's face was the color of dust. "Sheriff Walker," Tate said, trying to force a professional tone, "I believe there's been a misunderstanding." Duke finally holstered his revolver with a loud clack. "Oh, I understand perfectly, Lionel. You broke into a private residence, falsely claimed jurisdiction, and endangered everyone here. That's not a misunderstanding, Earl. That's criminal trespass and BNE, Clay." He turned to me. "They kicked the door in. You want to press charges?" I looked at the mess, my splintered door, the mud tracked everywhere, the sheriff who could have been shot over a misplaced code violation. "Let them clean it up," I said, finally finding my breath. "Fix my door, pay for the lock, issue a public, signed apology, and never set foot past my fence line again. Ever." Tate muttered, "Done." That should have been the end. But 2 days later, my custom-made, iron mailbox, a gift from my father, was cleanly sawed off at the base and gone. Earl was just getting creative and much, much dumber. I knew this was psychological warfare. Sheriff Duke told me he'd swing by, but he couldn't act on a missing mailbox. Then, it got darker. A woman, Martha Quinn, the HOA vice president, pulled up to my gate. "Mr. Jensen," she simpered, "I'm here with a proposal. We believe it's in the best interest of the community that your land be voluntarily annexed into our association." I laughed until my ribs hurt. "You want me to volunteer to give you control of my ranch?" "It would save a lot of future misunderstandings," she countered, the threat hidden beneath a layer of expensive foundation. I leaned down to her tinted window. "Lady, if I had to choose between joining your HOA or handing the keys to my ranch over to a pack of rabid feral hogs, I'd give the keys to the hogs. They're more predictable." The next night, I heard footsteps on my porch. Not on the gravel, on the wood. I crept to the window, shotgun in hand, just as the porch light exploded with a loud POP total darkness. When I went out, the figure was gone, but they left behind an envelope stuck to the broken post with a silver tack. HOA letterhead. Inside, one typed sentence. "You were warned." Rage, slow and volcanic, began to build in my gut. This wasn't just a push for land. This was a war of nerves. I called Duke. "Sheriff, it just turned into something else." Duke knew. He was documenting everything, but we needed them to cross a legal boundary he could use. Tate was just dancing on the edge. He finally crossed it a week later. I was falling asleep, trying to ignore the constant low-grade anxiety, when my motion alert buzzed. I opened the camera app. There were 3 figures, flashlights low, walking across my west pasture. They weren't on the road. They were inside the fence. I called Deputy Rodriguez. 15 minutes later, we were moving through the damp grass together, quiet and focused. We cornered them near the old shed. They scattered, dropping something metallic. It wasn't trash. It was a GPS tracking beacon, the kind you stick on a livestock trailer. They were trying to tag my equipment. Rodriguez radioed it in. "Confirmed, Sheriff. GPS tracking device. Evidence of premeditated surveillance. This is felony territory now." The next morning, the real punch landed. An urgent notice, an emergency zoning meeting at the county municipal building. And guess whose name was listed as the chief complainant? Lionel Tate. "They're trying to fast-track a zoning change that would classify part of your ranch as developable community land," Duke said, his voice tight. "They're trying to find the back door to your deeds." I walked into that meeting room, dusted off boots and all, carrying my grandfather's original 1954 surveyor's map. The room was packed with HOA members in their smug polo shirts. I locked eyes with Tate. "Hope you brought a good lie today, Lionel." Tate presented his pitch. My land was neglected, a fire hazard, and needed HOA oversight for community integrity. He finished with the kicker. If the landowner refuses, we move for county-level oversight due to public interest. I stood up, holding that yellowed map like a shield. Public interest? The only interest here is that you people are mad you can't control what you don't own. I showed the board the deed, the original survey, the state seal. This land is private. 3 generations. It is not part of your community, and it never will be. Tate slammed his hand down. "You don't understand. This man is a threat. His chickens roam. His paint is peeling." Mutterings and chuckles broke out. Tate had overplayed his hand. Then the door swung open. Sheriff Duke Walker, in full uniform, badge gleaming, walked in, and right beside him, an attorney from the state land use office. Duke handed a sealed envelope to the zoning board. The lead commissioner read it, his eyebrows rising. "Mr. Tate," he said slowly, "it appears you have been filing false claims regarding land ownership, and according to this report, your patrol group has committed multiple acts of trespass. We are not only rejecting your petition, but we are also opening a formal inquiry into Canyon Ridge HOA practices." The room imploded in whispers. Tate looked like a ghost. Motion denied. Unanimous. I went home thinking it was over. But the next night, my dogs went ballistic. I ran to the barn and saw it. Flames. A section of the outer wall was burning. The fire marshal confirmed it. Arson, gasoline. They declared war. I nodded slowly, staring at the burnt wood. Then it's time I stopped playing defense. The very next morning, I didn't go to the sheriff. I went straight to the county recorder's office and filed a motion that would make Tate weep. You see, Tate and his board were so busy looking at the surface, they forgot to check the real records. The ones my grandfather made sure stayed airtight after he bought this land dirt cheap during the oil rush of the 60s. Beneath Canyon Ridge estates, under their fake ponds, clubhouses, and regulationized driveways, ran old mineral veins. I filed a mineral rights activation. I had the title, signed, sealed, registered, and now I had officially reclaimed those rights. They had 30 days to respond. Imagine the perfect little HOA neighborhood with a humming drilling platform on the edge of the playground. Every time they watered their fancy imported hedges, they'd be doing it over land they didn't own and couldn't control. But then, the final, desperate act. Early one morning, my phone buzzed. It was my neighbor, yelling. I slammed the truck into gear. As I rounded the bend, I slammed the brakes so hard the tires shrieked. 8 vehicles, 2 huge bulldozers, and a dump truck. The HOA had sent a private construction crew to start building a gravel road straight across my pasture. This wasn't trespass. This was an invasion. I sprinted toward the chaos. Kill the engines. Now, Tate stood there, sunglasses on, sipping coffee, completely unfazed. You're overreacting, Clay. This is a planned access road. The county approved the development this morning. Emergency HOA infrastructure update. You forged that permit. I roared, my vision blurring with fury. Just then, a black and gold cruiser appeared at the top of the ridge. Then another. Then 3 more. Red and blue lights flashed in unison. Sheriff Walker stepped out, his shotgun across his shoulder, not drawn, but present. He strolled down the pasture like he owned it. Sheriff Walker. Tate stammered, trying to hold his composure. I wasn't aware we needed a police presence. Duke didn't smile. You didn't request one, Lionel. But the landowner did. And funny thing about your legal easement permit. Duke pulled a second file from under his arm. Your version was signed yesterday with a signature from someone who retired 6 months ago. You forged county documents, Lionel. That's a felony. The workers gasped. Tate went sheet white. You're coming with me, Duke said. 2 deputies flanked Tate and read him his rights. As they cuffed him, I finally breathed for the first time in weeks. But Duke wasn't done. He looked at the remaining workers. This is private land. You have 60 seconds to get back in your trucks and roll out, or you'll be charged with accessory trespass. They scrambled like ants under a magnifying glass. Bulldozers reversed, flags dropped, and trucks peeled off, leaving only dust and silence. That night, on the porch, Duke and I watched the stars. He thought you'd break, Duke said, sipping coffee. He didn't know this ranch is more than just acres, Duke, I replied. It's my father's sweat, my grandfather's dream, my future. And I wasn't about to let a few rich crooks turn it into a parking lot. But the final twist came just as we were heading inside. My phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. It read, "You got Lionel, but we're not all gone. See you soon." The board. A cold chill hit me. Lionel was just the puppet. The following week, the lawsuits began, 6 thick packets of them, all designed to bleed me dry. But then, the cavalry arrived, the community. Neighbors brought hay, tools, and 3 offers to fund a legal defense from the local farmers' union. And then, the real savior appeared, a woman named Kendra Fields, a real estate lawyer. "I left that HOA last year," she explained. "I sat on the board when Lionel joined. They made a deal with a massive foreign developer. Planned to develop your land into a luxury golf resort. You're the last property in the center. Without your ranch, the whole development collapses." She handed me a thumb drive. "Here's everything. Emails, minutes, internal documents." Lionel was just their distraction. This wasn't just a nosy HOA. This was corporate fraud, theft, and conspiracy. Duke took the evidence to the state attorney general. Within the week, subpoenas started flying. 4 board members were forced to resign. 2 were arrested for falsifying documents, and the foreign developer pulled out, leaving Canyon Ridge HOA stripped of funding and enforcement power, reduced to nothing more than a glorified neighborhood newsletter. A week later, Duke arrived with a folder. "It's official, Clay. The county just approved your historical preservation petition. Ironwood Ranch is now protected land. Can't be annexed. Can't be rezoned. By anyone." I stared at the papers. I didn't cry, but I came damn close. That night, the whole town came. We had a huge bonfire and burned the last of the fake violation letters. And as the fire cracked, someone asked me, "Why do you fight so hard, Clay?" I looked at the land, then at the people, and finally at the sky. Because some things are worth fighting for. And sometimes, you have to remind the bullies that in America, property rights still mean something. I got one final text from that unknown number. It read, "You stood tall. Respect. Some of us weren't in on the scam. We're cleaning house. You ever need backup? You've got friends on the inside now." I smiled. Maybe not all HOA members are evil, but mine? They'll think twice before ever crossing my gate again. Now, tell me in the comments, if this had happened to you, what would you have done first? Would you have called the sheriff? Or would you have gone for the mineral rights activation? Let me know your thoughts. And please, share this with anyone who needs a reminder that the little guy, armed with the truth, can still win.